NFL, I'm Richard French. Tonight, we will have our special report on elder abuse, hidden fears, and hidden tears. Did you know that nearly 5 million elderly Americans are victims of some type of abuse every year? We'll pull the curtain back on a hidden epidemic. And also tonight, we'll have live coverage of the New York City mayoral race. It's primary day, and we have got you covered. But first, we turn to Syria, and Karen Travers, she joins us live from the capital with the latest. Karen?
Good evening. A majority of Americans and a majority of lawmakers oppose a U.S. military strike on Syria, but President Obama insists that option must stay on the table. The focus is now shifting to diplomacy. Secretary of State John Kerry heads to Europe later this week to meet with his Russian counterpart to talk about a way forward. Today, President Obama took his Syria sales pitch to Capitol Hill.
Hey, guys.
Later tonight, he'll make his case to a skeptical nation. The U.S. has stepped back from the brink of a military strike. The Obama administration has joined calls for the United Nations Security Council to come up with a way to secure Syria's chemical weapons quickly.
This cannot be a process of delay. This cannot be a process of avoidance. That has to be real, has to be measurable, tangible.
Syria said today it will declare its weapons arsenal and sign a chemical weapons agreement. So now the diplomatic shuffle begins. Russian President Vladimir Putin said today the Syria plan can work if the U.S. drops its threat of force. But all indications from President Obama suggest that's not happening.
I don't think that we would have gotten to this point unless we had maintained a credible possibility of a military strike, and I don't think now's the time for us to let up on that.
The U.S., UK, and France are working closely on a game plan, but Russia has already rejected a French proposal that would lay out a plan for securing Syria's weapons, but also includes an authorization of the use of force. Even with so much uncertainty, lawmakers, especially Democrats, are breathing a sigh of relief.
The American people are weary of war, and we all are. I consider use of force a last resort.
A bipartisan group of senators is working on a new resolution that would give the UN time to take control of Syria's chemical weapons, but there would be a deadline. And if that fails, the U.S. could use military force. Reporting live from Capitol Hill, Karen Travers, ABC News. Now back to you.
All right, Karen, thank you very much. Now, opinions in Washington all over the map. You've got those who think force is justified because it is a moral issue, to those who think we just shouldn't get dragged in what could turn into yet another civil war.
All interventions are not created equal, and this proposal just does not stand up.
You know, as a mother, to me, I have an indelible, searing imprint on my mind.
Congressman?
After seeing the pictures of those babies lined up, and we have a moral responsibility to respond.
I see too much risk that a military strike could do more harm than good and set off a chain of consequences that could involve America's military men and women in yet another long-term civil war in the Middle East.
The Assad regime's inhuman use of weapons of mass destruction against innocent men, women, and children violates a universal norm at the heart of our global order. And therefore, it demands a strong response from the international community led by the United States.
My big concern right now is that this appears to be such a unilateral action. We've got to focus on, broadening and making this an international response.
For more, we're very pleased to be joined by Congressman Brian Higgins, Democrat out of New York, and he serves in the House Committee on Homeland Security as well as the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. Congressman, welcome to the show. Thanks for the time.
Good to be with you, Richard.
Well, it sure looks like this Russian proposal is gaining steam. Looks like it's going to come out of the UN with full support. And I know there's resolutions already being drawn in both chambers. Your perspective here, are you willing to sign on to to this deadline, but also with the consequences that if Assad doesn't play ball, you guys will authorize the use of force here by the president if by a deadline they're not fully compliant?
Yeah, I will not support any resolution that has as an end game a consequence a military strike on Syria under any circumstances.
Well, then what's the incentive for Assad to be compliant here? Why shouldn't he read that there's not a will internationally and it can continue to gas his people in large numbers without any downside?
Well, let me tell you this. Bashar al-Assad is a bad guy. That is for absolute certain. There is no question that he used chemical weapons on his own people. My concern is that the United States, again, could potentially get involved in a civil war in that part of the world for the third time in a decade, essentially alone again. You know, the international community that is said to be supporting our efforts here, well, there's 194 countries, and 2 countries, Turkey and France, said that they will participate with the United States. The others said they will support us so long as they don't have to do anything. The Arab League, a 22-country organization that has strategic interests in that area, their response has been pathetically weak. And, you know, the Arab-Muslim world, let's just be truthful about this. You know, they have been involved, Shia and Sunni, in a struggle for control over the past, since, you know, the 7th century, about who is the rightful political and spiritual successor to the Prophet Muhammad. So, you know, this is a civil war. There is no freedom and democracy movement here, and the choices in Syria are all bad. Assad's a bad guy, but the most effective fighters in the opposition are Al-Qaeda and Islamic extremists bent on creating an Islamist state in Syria.
But there are consequences, and I know you know this, both of action, as you articulate, but also inaction. What's the message right now to Israel that if the president says, hey, there's a red line here, and if they cross it, there'll be consequences, and we don't follow through, why shouldn't people in Tehran say the U.S. doesn't have an appetite for this? We're going to get right back going with our nuclear program, and Israel, from the U.S., you're on your own.
Yeah. Well, I would say, first of all, Israel, or the situation in Iran is entirely different. If Iran were to gain capability through uranium enrichment to possess a nuclear weapon, that's a different story altogether. That's an existential threat. That's a standout threat to our ally in the region, which is Israel. My concern is, think about it another way. Let's say that the United States were to participate in a military strike on Syria. Well, Hezbollah, who controls southern Lebanon, sits on Israel's northern border. Hezbollah possesses between 45,000 and 50,000 long and medium-range missiles. Hezbollah acts as a proxy for both Iran and Syria. A military strike could very likely end up in a military strike Hezbollah on Israel, and then the whole region is in turmoil. And again, America is right in the middle of that regional conflict, essentially by ourselves again.
Let me ask a political question here, even beyond the immediacy of the Middle East.
Sure.
Well, you know what we all thought we were going to be talking about before the incident and the video came to light of what happened in Syria. The fights that you guys were going to have in Congress on huge issues of importance, fiscal fights. Isn't the president neutered here in many ways as he goes into a hugely important session in Congress if he can't even get support from within even his own party on something as important as just authorization, let alone go ahead for military strikes?
To be truthful, even though I have opposed any kind of military intervention from day one, I think the political consequence to the president personally in terms of his agenda for what remains his term has been overstated. I think this is a very, very difficult and unique circumstance situation. The fact of the matter is Congress needs to get back to these issues. And, you know, we have learned, you know, in the past decade with 2 conflicts, 2 interventions and civil wars, that we can't win in these places. There are no good military options here. And I think, to be truthful, you know, the Russian proposal may have, you know, helped the president out politically here. But I think the White House has misread this one. I really do. When the spokesperson Jay Carney says today, in response to overwhelming American support against a military intervention in Syria, that it's complicated. That's insulting. That's insulting. The American people have been way ahead of the politicians in Washington on this issue. The fact of the matter is we've been involved in 2 civil wars in that part of the world. Iraq is as violent today as it ever has been. Afghanistan is as violent, poor, and as corruptive as it ever has been. So the lessons for us is we can't nation build in Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria. We have to nation build right here at home. Richard Haas just wrote the book, served in Republican administrations. Foreign policy starts at home with a strong, prosperous America.
Congressman, I really appreciate a few minutes here. Congressman Brian Higgins, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it very much.
All right, we're bringing our panel on. This, we've got Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and Andrew Whitman, senior political correspondent. Now, I disagree with the congressman. I think there is more peril to just saying no and the message that sends the Middle East. But whether this was Kerry running his mouth without thinking of it, or this was more planned at the White House, it looks like the administration might have stepped in some good luck here right now. It seems like the Russian proposal is something everybody can get behind here, even if you don't believe all the agendas and all the actors involved. It might be a way out for the administration. Do you consider this more lucky, or do you think that there's credit could go to the administration one way or the other?
Well, I think the administration definitely got lucky, but there's, you make your luck in some cases, and by applying pressure and banging the drums looking for military strikes, I think it did put some pressure on Russia to actually offer this proposal. And if they can get everybody behind it, I think it'll be, one of those deals where they've made their luck and reap some political benefits as well.
This is one of those things, Dom, where we see literally diplomacy in real time, how this whole thing is playing out. I don't know the president would have scheduled this primetime address that he's going to have 9 o'clock that we'll bring to you folks at home tonight if he knew the last 36 hours on how this thing would have been moving along at both the UN level and obviously seeing it through diplomatic channels. That said, he's got to say, listen, anybody who trusts Assad at face value, you're crazy. Give me the leverage that I can have military authorization here, and it'll keep these guys focused to come to a deal. I'm just not so sure Congress is going to give it to him. I think if we're hearing the reports right, White House probably wants them to put off the vote for as long as they can.
Well, that may be the case. Well, I watched quite interestingly, Richard, the interview you just did with the congressman, and I found it fascinating because he's right. The very end of his interview, pay close attention, I know you did, to what the congressman said. There are many people in America, my contention is a majority, and thus it's illustrated by their representatives in Washington, that feel a strong foreign policy starts here at home, building up America. And so you may say, or Andrew may say, this president is lucky. I contend in many cases we do create our own luck. I subscribe to that theory. But I think that this president is due some credit, because this president can say now, and again, this is a fluid situation, it could change tomorrow if this deal falls apart, Richard, but this president can make an argument that he was strong enough not to use military action.
Andrew, in terms of when we're going to know how Congress feels about this, it looks like they're asking leadership to push back the vote here for a little while. We probably won't get a vote maybe as early as this week, right?
I think we might see votes next week and give a chance for the UN, give a chance for some international diplomacy to work its way through.
And hopefully the president gets his way. He doesn't have to have a vote here, because I don't think he's got the votes for it right now. Now, we will have at 9 p.m. here, right here, special coverage of the president's address. We'll bring it to you entirely, and then we'll bring you at home into our conversation to sound off as well. Please call in during the address and make your opinions heard if the president changed your mind one way or the other, and whether or not, if you were in Washington, you would authorize the use of force, obviously with this contentious issue coming up in Syria. All right, speaking of coming up, we switch gears here, and they come from different backgrounds, but they all have one common thing. They have all been abused. Tonight, an RFL special report here. We take a look at elder abuse, a hidden crime. It often goes underreported and affects people of all different backgrounds, ethnicities, races, and gender. A warning, what some of the things you will see will be both shocking and graphic, and we give viewer discretion as an advisement. Elder abuse, hidden fears, and hidden tears. Our special report coming up straight ahead.